So in this video, we're going to dive deep. We're going to dive deep into dyspraxia, and we're not just scratching the surface. So for a significant period of time, we will explore how to actually talk about dyspraxia, but in what context, whether that's with friends, family, or even a casual conversation over the dinner table. Because let's be honest, understanding starts with a conversation. And we will discuss dyspraxia and mental health, which is like a niche, but such an important subject. And I'll be discussing that from my perspective. So mental health and dyspraxia from my perspective. And we'll also look at the connection between dyspraxia and language. Why? Why would you look at that? Well, because words matter. And dyspraxia matters. So it's important to discuss this. And plus, if you've ever wondered how dyspraxia can impact driving, we'll get into that too. Because I have an interesting story with regards to dyspraxia and driving, or lack of driving. Now, why is this? It's because it's all about raising awareness, breaking down barriers, and making conversations of this nature a normal part of everyday life. My ultimate purpose is to promote my social enterprise NeuroExpression. What is NeuroExpression? Well, NeuroExpression is a social enterprise that empowers neurodivergent people, which would include people that have dyspraxia. But I also want to start interesting conversations about dyspraxia, and this is part of creating that dialogue. So let's begin. Now, before we go into the next part, I want to promote some education within the dyspraxia space. So to aid understanding, here are 3 key questions. Question 1. What is dyspraxia and how does it affect everyday tasks like tying shoelaces, buttoning a shirt, or riding a bike? Question 2. In what ways can living with dyspraxia encourage creativity, resilience, and unique problem solving? And finally, question 3. In what ways can dyspraxia impact a person's emotional well-being and social interactions? Answering these questions raises understanding and empathy, helping to reduce stigma and misconceptions about dyspraxia. And greater awareness can lead to better support, inclusion, and opportunities for people with dyspraxia to thrive in education, work, and daily life. To me in life, there's a lot of battles, right? Lots of different battles in life. And you could be engaged in any one of these battles. You can have the friendship battles. You could have the money battles. We can all relate to that, right? You could have battles within the educational system. You know, the battle of trying to get a degree, a college certificate, etc. You could have family battles. And obviously family battles can be multifarious. You could have job battles. Maybe you're not getting on with your colleagues, or maybe you're having a battle with your manager or senior management. And you can have business battles, and they can be the worst. Maybe you're an entrepreneur who's struggling to make ends meet. And all these battles, they all have their own little nuances. So, for example, every job battle is not the same. Every family battle is not the same. So, one family, there could be an issue with the mother, or another family, it could be an issue with the brothers, sisters, etc. And right now, I feel like I'm having a battle with capitalism. And I've used the word capitalism as opposed to business for a reason. But more importantly, I have a battle with my mental health. Dyspraxia and mental health, the struggle intensifies. So this is like a letter to myself, because sometimes I feel like my mental health is declining. Yeah, definitely sometimes I feel like my mental health has been declining. So this is like a letter, because I need solutions, and I guess we all need solutions. And the funny thing is, objectively, so many people have it much worse than I do. And unfortunately, I can't get into specifics right now. I just can't do that. That would not be a smart thing to do. But maybe in another video, I can be more specific. And it's almost like, it's like this dyspraxia thing, because I have dyspraxia and suspected autism. It's like this dyspraxia thing, in this context, it just makes it worse. It adds another layer. It adds another layer of confusion. So let me try and paint a picture, because it's like I can see the darkness coming. I can see it coming. But I feel like at the moment that I just can't do anything to stop it. But I'm just saying that I'm upset, but so many people are in a worse situation. But you know what? I've realized that all of us, or most of us, are just one bad decision away from being broke. So you could have like 100 grand or 100 bags in your account, or £1 million in your account, but you're one bad decision, one bad business decision, and it's all gone. It's just all gone. And I feel like dyspraxia can make your mental health worse. And it's funny, right? Because I can't even qualify that position, but I just feel like it can make it worse. And I feel like me and dyspraxia have been having like this really, really intense battle. But you know what? Let me pivot. What's the solution? Well, sometimes the solution might just be doing whatever keeps you sane, or try and find something that makes you happy, and then consistently doing that. And you know what? I actually spoke, I don't want to talk about the context, but I spoke to a mental health specialist the other day. I spoke to them, had a conversation. And as you could imagine, we had a friendly conversation. And the one thing I remembered about that conversation is they came up with a potential solution. And they said to me, come up with a gratitude list. And they actually said, tell yourself 20 things. So tell yourself 20 things that you're grateful for. So considering this, I've decided to sit down and have a think. And here is my current list. So these are the things that I'm grateful for. So number one, I'm grateful for my mother, for her unconditional love, strength, and guidance. I appreciate her every day. Number two, I'm grateful for my social enterprise, the fact that I can make a positive impact and empower specifically neurodivergent people. Of course, I'm grateful for my partner, for the companionship and the emotional support. Number four, I'm grateful that in one sense I have a clear purpose, and part of that purpose is linked to my social enterprise, and that gives me direction and it fuels my motivation. I'm also, number five, I'm grateful for my job coach, and he's currently supporting me in a variety of ways, and that support is really essential. Number six, I'm grateful for the opportunities to grow and evolve and contribute. And even though that times are hard in Britain, there's still opportunities, in particular business opportunities. Number seven, I'm grateful for good health, because obviously physical health is the foundation of everything. Number eight, I'm grateful for a place to live, shelter, warmth, peace, etc. Number nine, I'm grateful for my friends, and a lot of them, they inspire, they uplift, and they understand, and they listen. Number 10, I'm grateful for the access to education and knowledge, because fundamentally this is the power to learn and to grow. Number 11, the ability to help others. And that to me is really important. And for me, the ability to help others is through my social enterprise. Number 12, moments of laughter. That really lightens the spirit. Dragon's Den, that's really been making me laugh a lot recently. Number 13, the lessons from hard times. The lessons from hard times. Because even though hard times can make us feel sad, they can build resilience and they can build wisdom. Number 14, I'm grateful for nature, for grounding, perspective, and for beauty. Number 15, creativity and self-expression. For someone with dyspraxia, I think that's a massive thing, and creativity has always been a part of my life. Number 16, I'm grateful for the freedom to make choices in life, work, and relationships. And, we can all take this for granted. Number 17, a supportive community, or I should say, supportive people within the community. Number 18, inner growth and healing. So it's that progress that often goes unseen, but you feel it deeply. And I feel like making this video is actually part of that. And number 19, technology, because technology, for all its downsides, it has the ability to connect, to empower, and to enable. And then the final one is the spiritual connection. So that whole thing of bringing deeper peace and deep trust in your journey. And I'm actually going to add another one. So we're going to add 21, and that's a new day. And a new day is a sunrise, or you see a sunrise, which is an opportunity. It's a chance to start afresh. So that's my gratitude list. It's supposed to be 20 things, but it's 21 things. And I think it's important to have a gratitude list, especially when you're going through it or you're having some difficulties. And I have to remind myself to try and be grateful. I'm thinking maybe I should say this every morning to make it part of my routine. Just recite it every morning so it becomes like a part of me. Anyway, I'm going to pivot. And I'm going to talk about, before we go into the final section of this video, I'm just going to talk about my book, Neurodiverse Voices. Now, this book, right, called Neurodiverse Voices, is a collaboration. It's not just of myself, but it's also of different neurodivergent artists. And these neurodivergent artists, which are neurodivergent contributors, they've helped me put this book together. So effectively, and what was the purpose of this book was to build a neurodiverse product, but more importantly, to build it, for it to be built by neurodiverse people. And if you're intrigued about this, there's actually a free sample. There'll be a free sample in the comments, and there'll be a free sample in the description box. Anyway, let me pivot back to this mental health stuff and dyspraxia. And I guess, to me in life, there's a lot of battles, right? Lots of different battles in life. And you could be engaged in any one of these battles. You can have the friendship battles. You could have the money battles. We can all relate to that, right? You could have battles within the educational system. The battle of trying to get a degree, a college certificate, etc. You could have family battles. And obviously family battles can be multifarious. You could have job battles. Maybe you're not getting on with your colleagues, or maybe you're having a battle with your manager or senior management. And you can have business battles, and they can be the worst. Maybe you're an entrepreneur who's struggling to make ends meet. And all these battles, they all have their own little nuances. So, for example, every job battle is not the same. Every family battle is not the same. So, one family, there could be an issue with the mother, or another family, it could be an issue with the brothers, sisters, etc. And right now, I feel like I'm having a battle with capitalism. And I've used the word capitalism as opposed to business for a reason. But more importantly, I have a battle with my mental health. And you know what? Obviously, I got this dyspraxia thing going on. And I feel like sometimes dyspraxia is sometimes it's my friend, but then at other times it feels like it's my enemy. And you know what? I feel like I'm in a point in my life where I'm trying to open a new door. I'm trying to open a new door, figuratively speaking, to a new house. Or maybe I'm just trying to find a new house, figuratively speaking. Now, kind of gone everywhere with this video, but if there's a message to the video, to this particular video, it would be the following. The first lesson is that life is a struggle. Life is definitely a struggle. And the second message is to look after yourself. And in looking after yourself, prioritize your mental health. The following questions are to aid understanding in dyspraxia and mental health. Question 1. How does dyspraxia affect emotional well-being and mental health risks? Question 2. What strategies help support mental health in people with dyspraxia? And finally, question 3. How do social misunderstandings of dyspraxia impact self-esteem and isolation? Which is the power of language, talking about dyspraxia respectfully. Now, the premise here is that words matter, because the way we talk about dyspraxia and neurodivergence more broadly, this shapes how individuals are seen, how they see themselves, and how the world responds to their needs, and how the world responds to their strengths. So when speaking about neurodivergent identities, you'll notice two common styles, and the question would be, what are those two common styles? So we have identity first language, and then we have person first language. What does this all mean? Let's give some examples. Let's first define identity first language in some type of context. So identity first language puts the condition before the person. Autistic person like Maya. Dyslexic person like Jacob. ADHD individual like Leo. Dyspraxic person like Aisha. I think you may get the picture. But what's person first language? So person first language puts the person before the condition. Let's give an example. So a person with autism. Maya, a person with autism. A person with dyslexia. Jacob, a person with dyslexia. A person with ADHD. Leo, a person with ADHD. A person with dyspraxia. Aisha, a person with dyspraxia. So some people feel strongly about which language is used to describe them. Identity first language is often preferred by individuals who see their neurodivergence as some integral part of who they are, not something separate and not something negative. So for example, many in the autistic community prefer autistic person. Why? Why do they prefer autistic person? Because autism is the core to how they experience and understand the world. Similarly, some people with dyspraxia embrace the term dyspraxic person because it feels more affirming and it feels more authentic. So others prefer person first language because it emphasizes humanity. So there's some variation here, but I think it's important to have the awareness of what it means. What does it mean to be, what does it mean to be identity first language or person first language? And then the next question is which one to implement appropriately. But what is empowering language for people with dyspraxia? That sounds like a good question. Well, first, what should precede that question is, what does empowerment actually mean? Because that is a statement, or that is a word, the word being empowerment, that's thrown around but is rarely defined. So here's a standard definition. Empowerment is the process of gaining confidence, control, and the ability to make choices that affects one's life. It involves building self-esteem, accessing resources or opportunities, and having a voice in decisions. So empowerment can apply to individuals or communities and often includes developing skills, rights awareness, and a sense of autonomy. Ultimately, it's about enabling people to take charge of their lives and reach their full potential. So empowering language for people with dyspraxia focuses on strengths, not limitations. It avoids labels like clumsy or disordered and instead acknowledges challenges while highlighting abilities and highlighting progress. Using respectful person-first language like a person with dyspraxia supports dignity and it supports self-worth. Empowering language promotes understanding. It emphasizes individuality and it encourages confidence, helping others see beyond difficulties to the unique talents and resilience of people living with dyspraxia, which is dyspraxia versus ADHD versus autism. What are the key differences? So we're going to get figurative again. So imagine a garden with three distinct but intertwined vines: dyspraxia, ADHD, and autism. They grow together, but they are not the same plant. Let me repeat that. They grow together, but they are not the same plant. So dyspraxia primarily affects coordination and motor planning. ADHD affects attention regulation, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Autism involves social communication difficulties, sensory sensitivities and restricted or repetitive behaviors. They often coexist, and this makes the diagnosis complex. So a child with ADHD might appear disorganized due to inattention, while a child with dyspraxia might be disorganized because it takes them longer to plan and execute tasks. An autistic child might avoid eye contact due to sensory discomfort, while a dyspraxic child may avoid it because they're focusing on not dropping their cup. We can see this distinction. So the key here is in the why. Dyspraxia is about physical coordination and planning, while ADHD is about regulating mental focus, and autism is about processing social and sensory information. While overlaps exist, clearly, they each have their own unique profiles, and misdiagnosis is common when these differences aren't well understood. Think of it this way. ADHD is the engine revving too fast. Autism is the dashboard rewired. And dyspraxia is the GPS rerouting mid-turn. All of these need different types of fuel. And I sincerely hope that you understand that there are differences between these natural variations. But let's give a quick visual example to emphasize the point more thoroughly. So Jack, let's take Jack, our common fictional character. Jack has dyspraxia and may take more time to learn physical tasks, but shows great determination and creativity. While Sally has ADHD, but she may struggle and focus at times, but brings high energy and innovative thinking. And then there's John. John has autism, and he prefers routines and finds social situations challenging, but has strong attention and detail and unique problem-solving skills. So hopefully this visual example can paint a clearer picture of the differences between these variations. Here are 3 questions to aid understanding about dyspraxia and language. Question 1. As someone with dyspraxia, how does my condition shape the way I express myself verbally and interpret language from others? Question number 2. In what ways can I, as a person with dyspraxia, better advocate for my communication needs in social and professional settings? And finally, question 3. How can understanding the connection between dyspraxia and language help me build more confidence in conversations and public speaking? It's not correct just to put someone in a box because they have dyspraxia, particularly in that clumsy box. And I personally think clumsy is a word that has a negative denotation, connotation, etc. Let's move to myth number 2. You just need to try harder. Again, this concept of trying harder assumes that you're not trying hard, or it can, the question again could have that assumption, and that in itself can be the wrong assumption. So imagine trying to write with your non-dominant hand while balancing on one foot. No matter how hard you try, it's going to be awkward, right? It's going to be messy and it's going to be exhausting. And dyspraxia can feel like that when I'm trying to do things that come naturally to others. So what's the point here? The point here is that effort isn't the issue, it's the way my brain is wired. So when someone says you just need to try harder, they're not having the appropriate empathy because they don't understand the condition. And why would they? Because they don't have the condition. How to explain dyspraxia and neurodiversity to friends and family. Now, before we begin, let's start with the preface that I always do. So I have dyspraxia. I was diagnosed at university, and there is suspected autism as well. So let's begin. And we're going to begin with an ant analogy. So just imagine a line of ants marching in perfect formation, and they're following like this invisible trail, each one instinctively knowing where to go. Now imagine one little ant. So one little ant out of all these ants marching in perfect trail, and their GPS is just a little different. Maybe its legs are a bit wobbly, or its sense of direction isn't quite the same as the others. And when we say the others, we mean the other ants. So instead of following the line, this ant kind of zigzags, it pauses, it stumbles, and it pauses and zigzags again. But then it finds its own way. And in one sense, that ant, that represents me. Because dyspraxia, like neurodiversity in general, isn't about being broken, it's about navigating the world differently. It's like trying to dance to music that only I can hear, while everyone else seems to be grooving to the same beat. And here's an important distinction, and this is what I want you to take from this story. It's not wrong, it's just different. Let me repeat, it's not wrong, it's just different. But to people who don't experience it from their perspective, from where they're coming from, it can look like laziness, clumsiness, or forgetfulness. And that's where the misunderstanding happens. So let's clear this up. So what is dyspraxia? So let's imagine you're at the dinner table and you're trying to explain this very simple question. How would you explain what is dyspraxia in the scenario of the dinner table? You can smell the food, there is a bunch of small talk, but then this serious question arises, serious but reasonable. What is dyspraxia? So you may pause, and in a perfect world, you may say something like, dyspraxia is a neurological condition that affects coordination, movement, and how the brain processes information. It's not about intelligence. Now, this is such an important point. It's not about intelligence. It's about how signals travel from the brain to the body, sometimes taking detours or arriving slightly delayed. So what does this mean? It means that it can make everyday tasks like tying shoelaces, writing neatly, or even planning and organizing more challenging. And then you might make the example more personal by including a character, because this is always a great way to explain something. So let's take Jack. That's our fictional character. So Jack is great at storytelling and coming up with creative ideas, but when it comes to pouring a drink, his hands don't always cooperate. He might spill water simply because his brain and muscles aren't in sync or as smoothly as someone else's. It's like knowing exactly what to do, but your body moves like it's on a slight delay, like a video buffering just a second too late. So I would say at the dinner table, this would be a great explanation of what is dyspraxia. But then there's two folds to this, because then when we say what is dyspraxia, then that naturally leads to the question, what is neurodiversity? Because neurodivergence is naturally a part of dyspraxia. Again, let's stay with the table analogy. So again, you're at the dinner table, you're eating food, drinking, and as others are engaging in small talk, Sally is, let's say she's to the left, and she's curious, and she's been thinking about this for a while, and she looks you in your eye and she says, what is neurodiversity? And initially you might think, well, that's strange. This is weird, because that's a serious question in a setting that is more conducive to small talk. But again, in the perfect world, you may state the following. Neurodiversity is the idea that brains come in different models, like phones with different operating systems. Some people run iOS and some on Android and some on entirely different systems altogether. They all work just in unique ways. So people with conditions like dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, or dyslexia, they experience the world differently. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. Just like a fish isn't bad at climbing a tree, it's just built for swimming. So in that sense, neurodiversity represents someone who does something differently as opposed to doing something wrong. So again, I think this would be a great definition, or a good definition, for introducing someone to neurodiversity. And hopefully that answers Sally's question. So now let's go into the common myths and misconceptions of dyspraxia, neurodiversity, etc. And the first myth is you're just clumsy. Now let's unpack that question. It doesn't say you're clumsy, it says you're just clumsy. And there's a distinction between saying you're clumsy or you're just clumsy. Because you're clumsy could mean that you're clumsy, but you're intelligent, you're creative, you have X, Y, and Z. But you're just clumsy means that you should be just defined within that box. So, yes, many people with dyspraxia may trip over their feet, and many can have a habit of knocking over drinks. But dyspraxia isn't just about motor skills, it's about coordination in a bigger sense. It affects how I process information, how I plan, and how I execute tasks. But it's not just clumsiness, because it can become packaged with other things. Jack has dyspraxia, may be clumsy, but he may be great linguistically. He may be extremely creative. He may be a scientist, a mathematician, etc. So it's really not. It's not correct just to put someone in a box because they have dyspraxia, particularly in that clumsy box. And I personally think clumsy is a word that has a negative connotation, etc. Let's move to myth number 2. You just need to try harder. So, again, this concept of trying harder assumes that you're not trying hard, or it can. The question again could have that assumption, and that in itself can be the wrong assumption. So imagine trying to write with your non-dominant hand while balancing on one foot. No matter how hard you try, it's going to be awkward, right? It's going to be messy and it's going to be exhausting. And dyspraxia can feel like that when I'm trying to do things that come naturally to others. So what's the point here? The point here is that effort isn't the issue, it's the way my brain is wired. So when someone says you just need to try harder, they're not having the appropriate empathy because they don't understand the condition. And why would they? Because they don't have the condition. And then we have myth 3, you'll grow out of it. And this is categorically incorrect, because dyspraxia isn't something you fix or outgrow. So instead of saying you'll grow out of it, you may say that you could find walkarounds or develop strategies or become more confident. But in one sense, I'll always think and move differently. But you won't grow out of it, because dyspraxia, from my understanding of the research, is a lifelong condition. So if you have dyspraxia in your childhood, by default, you will have it in your adulthood. It's not something that goes away because it's a lifelong condition. A lifelong condition means it's lifelong. And obviously some people may use that statement and they may have a positive intention. So the term "you'll grow out of it" could be said in a positive way, and it can be said in a negative way. And I think it's kind of important to establish the context of how that statement is being said. But regardless of the context, it's objectively wrong. But the important thing is that when you have dyspraxia, from my perspective, it's about finding strategies and ways to deal with your barriers. So for example, because I have poor memory, it's hard for me to follow a workout. Like, it's just difficult. So for me, because of my bad memory, if I don't have a pre-planned workout in place, I won't be able to do it. So the way I get over that is that I will have a pre-planned workout that's already predetermined, so that when I go to do that workout, I can just do it, and then there's no decision fatigue, and then I can just focus on what needs to be done. Because effectively, if I go into a workout and then I'm thinking, should I do this, should I do that, that's decision fatigue. And then I'm thinking about my coordination, and then it just becomes unbearable. But if I've got this preconceived strategy of, okay, this is what I need to do, then I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to deal with that decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is a very interesting thing. Allegedly, we make 200 decisions just on food a day. So decision fatigue is a real thing. And I would argue that even though neurotypical and neurodivergent people engage in decision fatigue or encounter decision fatigue, you could argue that dyspraxia may exacerbate decision fatigue further. So how does dyspraxia show up in daily life? So let's talk about physical coordination. So we've got running, catching, driving, or even walking in a straight line can be trickier than it looks. Let me give you an example. So and I've spoken about this before, when I graduated with a postgraduate degree in social work, one of the reasons why I didn't engage in social work was because I wasn't able to drive. And one of the primary reasons for not being able to drive was the barriers that were presented due to my dyspraxia, which would affect organization and coordination. And remember, because dyspraxia affects fine and gross motor skills, i.e. your fingers and your hands, your hands, these are essential for driving because you're grabbing the steering wheel, changing the clutch, etc. So that's an example, and obviously that affected my professional career. Again, when we talk about fine motor skills, this can affect, using a zipper, buttons, handwriting, and even using a knife and fork. This can be a challenge. And remember that this can affect people in different ways. So, Jack may struggle with his handwriting, or Sally may struggle more with a knife and fork. So dyspraxia can affect people on different levels. And then, of course, we have organization of memory. So if I say, remind me to do that later, chances are I'll forget it unless it's written down. And if it's written down on a random piece of paper, I'm probably going to lose that piece of paper. And then we have speech and processing. So sometimes my brain has the perfect sentence ready, but my mouth gets lost in translations. Other times I need a few extra moments to process what's being said. And that's something that's really missed within dyspraxia, is the processing, because the processing is difficult within the dyspraxia brain. So it doesn't mean that the words are not there, or their imagery isn't there, or the ideas are not there. It's just processing it and trying to, get it from your brain into something legible that people can understand and articulate it accordingly. That can definitely be a challenge with people that have dyspraxia. So how to support someone with dyspraxia? So this is just my perspective, purely from my perspective. So I guess it's awareness. Again, I criticize awareness, but awareness is important, but we want to get to awareness to solutions generally. But I guess it's that awareness of, if I take longer to tie my shoes or find my words, patience goes a long way. So it's about trying to understand what I'm saying, or understanding that, like when I walk, or when I do some minor workouts, I always find that my shoelaces keep going undone, and sometimes I have balance issues. And that's a product of my dyspraxia. That's not me being lazy. That's a product of my condition. So patience is key. Don't judge the stumbles. For me, spilling drinks isn't a major issue for me. It's not a major issue, but obviously for want of a better word, clumsiness can become apparent. And I guess, again, it just means understanding that if I'm spilling, or if I'm being a bit uncoordinated, this is a product of my condition. And again, it's about patience, and it's about empathy. And this is really an important one. Celebrate strengths. So again, I struggle with coordination, but I feel like I'm creative, a great problem solver, and someone who has a unique perspective. Again, we all have unique perspectives, whether we're neurodiverse or neurotypical, but I feel like being neurodiverse, it adds another layer of uniqueness. So it's that understanding that neurodiversity comes with challenges, but it also brings strengths. And as someone with dyspraxia who project manages certain projects, so I have an exhibition coming out. So I have an exhibition coming out this year and I have a book coming out this year. And I always encourage or try to encourage solution-focused thinking. So my thing is, don't just tell me the problem, tell me the solution. And again, that's how my mind works. It's not just about coming up with the problem, it's about coming up with the solution. And to me, I think that's where my strength is. My strength is not in just identifying the problems, which is important, but it's also about identifying the potential solution. So for me, when I look at other people, I always try to see the strengths. So I try to be consistent in my narrative. So the same way I want you to identify my strengths is the same way I will always try to identify your strengths. So I guess it's recognizing it's a different kind of path. So living with dyspraxia can be like walking through a dense forest while others have a clear, paved path. I might have to climb over roots, take detours, and carve out my own trail, but at the end of the day, I'll still get where I'm going. It just might take a little longer. This is where resilience is so important. So if you see me and I'm stumbling, fumbling, or figuring things out my own way, just know that I'm not lost. I'm just navigating life on my own unique path. One step, one stumble, and one victory at a time. And here's what I would do now, or here's what I would do if the dyspraxia didn't affect me in such a significant way. Because just because my dyspraxia stopped me from driving, that doesn't mean your dyspraxia can stop you from driving. And of course, there are lots of people that have dyspraxia and drive. And just to clarify, I still don't drive, but that doesn't mean you can't drive. Fortunately for me, in work, I'm able to access support to get a job coach. This is a long story, but to summarize it quickly, I had support provided where this job coach can provide transport and other services, and the aims of those services that they provided was to reduce the barriers of the disability. And when we're talking about disability, we're talking about it in the legal context, because dyspraxia or neurodivergence in the legal context is seen as a disability, and in this context is positive because that means that you can get support. Dyspraxia and driving, my journey and the road ahead. So before we begin, I think it's important to establish that I have dyspraxia. I was diagnosed at university. So I think that's an important preface to begin with. Anyway, just imagine being handed the keys to your future only to realize you can't turn the ignition. And I'm talking metaphorically. And in some way that was me, because I had the education, I had the passion and drive, just not the driving ability. For years, dyspraxia stood between me and the independence I desperately needed. But let me tell you, just because the road is bumpy doesn't mean you can't reach your destination. So let me give you a little breakdown of my story as someone who has dyspraxia. So when I qualified as a social worker, so I did a postgraduate qualification as a social worker, I was ready to make a difference, a social difference. I had studied hard, passed my exams eventually, and envisioned a career where I could help others navigate life's challenges. And social work is a very difficult path to take, believe me. But despite this, there was one major problem, or there probably was a few major problems if I'm honest, but there was one significant problem, and that was I couldn't drive. Now, dyspraxia isn't just about being what some would term being clumsy. It affects coordination, spatial awareness, and the ability to process multiple instructions at once, which is actually a pretty important skill when you're behind the wheel. So, when you think when you're driving, you're looking left, you're looking right, and you're processing things. Perception is important, not to be too close to the car in front of you. There's a variety of things going on, even, one hand's on the clutch, another one's on the wheel. There's a variety of things going on when you're engaging in driving. So you're effectively processing multiple instructions at once, and that can be a barrier. And if you have coordination issues, or if you have the variety of issues that can be associated with dyspraxia, this can create barriers. So while my classmates were zipping off to their new jobs, I was effectively stuck in one place. Many of the roles I wanted, or all the roles I wanted, required a driving license. Things have changed now, but at the time, everything required a driving license, even if you wanted to join an agency. And public transport within the social work context wasn't an option. So, you're getting rejections, you're just not eligible to even apply. Of course, the one difference here, or the contextual difference here, would be perhaps a social worker in a hospital setting. And so despite these qualifications, having a degree and then having a postgraduate degree in social work, I was unemployed. I think it was for about 2 years. And let me tell you, it was 2 long years of feeling like I had failed before I had even started. And 2 years of watching opportunities slip away, not because I potentially lacked ability, but because I lacked the one skill that everyone seemed to take for granted. And of course, this compromised earning potential, or any potential. And, naturally my confidence hit a rock bottom because I really, really wanted to work. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to rebuild. So what was my road to independence? We'll just be brief about this because I more want to talk about solutions. So fast forward 13 years and there's been some changes. I did work for 13 years, or I do work for 13 years, not as social work, but in a similar role. But additionally, I got an additional postgraduate degree in social work assessing. And ironically, I don't do that. And I also did a master's degree in the moving image. And effectively that led to me building my own business, which is actually a social enterprise. For those that don't know, a business can be a sole trader, an LLC, social enterprise, and there are other options as well. I chose a social enterprise, and to me, I proved to myself that one roadblock doesn't mean the journey is over. And let's clarify, there are going to be more roadblocks ahead of my journey, especially we're living in a time of inflation and etc. Don't really want to get into the politics. Anyway, for anyone with dyspraxia who feels like driving is an impossible task, I kind of want to share that, the traditional route didn't work for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work for you. And here's what I would do now, or here's what I would do if the dyspraxia didn't affect me in such a significant way. Because just because my dyspraxia stopped me from driving, that doesn't mean your dyspraxia can stop you from driving. And of course, there are lots of people that have dyspraxia and drive. And just to clarify, I still don't drive, but that doesn't mean you can't drive. Fortunately for me, in work, I'm able to access support to get a job coach. This is a long story, but to summarize it quickly, I had support provided where this job coach can provide transport and other services. And the aims of those services that they provided was to reduce the barriers of the disability. And when we're talking about disability, we're talking about it in the legal context, because dyspraxia or neurodivergence in the legal context is seen as a disability. And in this context is positive because that means that you can get support. So for me now, we're going to talk about finding the right instructor, because clearly not all drivers are created equal. So if I was trying to drive, or if I was advising someone with dyspraxia to drive, I would probably look for someone to teach me that either has dyspraxia and or has experience with working with people that has dyspraxia. Because, for people that have dyspraxia, driving can feel like juggling, on a unicycle or on a tightrope while blindfolded. So you need to look for an instructor that has two things: empathy, so they can kind of understand to some extent where you're coming from. But secondly, you need them to have solutions on how to deal with that, because empathy is like awareness. That's where we start, but it's not where we finish. So we definitely need solutions. And they'll need to understand through their professional experience and expertise of understanding your condition or having empathy that things may need to be broken down differently, that muscle memory may take longer to build. And that parallel parking might feel like solving a Rubik's Cube in the dark. And another thing is that the right instructor will need to have patience. And they're more likely to have patience if they have that empathy and have that portfolio of working with other clients that have dyspraxia. I'm assuming that driving instructors use the terminology of clients. So they need to be able to work with how your brain learns, not against it. Because if you think of it like this, if you have a neurotypical person that has no understanding of dyspraxia and no understanding how to support you, well, this is a recipe for disaster. So I guess for me, one of the biggest breakthroughs that I've had is realizing that, learning isn't a one size fits all. So if you have dyspraxia, the way you absorb and retain information is probably different to someone that's neurotypical, or potentially different to other neurodivergent people. So why would you try to learn driving the way everyone else does? It wouldn't make sense. So what's the solution here? We've got the awareness, but what's the solution? So if you're a visual learner, I would probably suggest to get diagrams, videos, and step-by-step images to map out your driving techniques. Use color coding and visual cues to help remember actions. But maybe you're not a visual learner, maybe you're a verbal learner. If that's the case, you need to talk yourself through the process, repeat instructions out loud, create rhythms to help sequences stick. But maybe you're not a visual learner, and maybe you're not a verbal learner, maybe you're a kinesthetic learner. And if that's the case, you'll need lots of hands-on practice, sitting in the car, even without driving, and going through the notions that can help you build muscle memory. Because driving isn't about skill, it's about strategy, or so I'm told. So figuring out what works for you is really, really, really important. And I believe that there are, because your next question may be, I don't know what type of learner I am. And I guess if you're in that boat, and I think a lot of us are in that boat, you can take questionnaires to figure out what type of learner you are. And some people may not be visual learners. There might be a combination of visual learner, verbal learner, kinesthetic learner, etc. So it's really important to take the time to ascertain, what type of learner you are, because then it will be easier to map out a way to achieve the goal. And the goal in this context is trying to drive. So I guess for me, the road ahead, not being able to drive cost me, years of opportunity, but it hasn't stopped me. It hasn't stopped me from trying to build the life I wanted. And I remind myself that slow progress is still progress. And just because your route looks different doesn't mean you won't reach the same destination. And I guess for me, I looked at the not being able to drive. And when I did get into work, I thought to myself, well, because driving incurs an expense, my thing was, okay, the barriers of my neurodivergence is stopping me from driving, but I can turn this into a positive because then I can save more money. And that actually worked out for me. But you might be someone with dyspraxia, you might be a qualified social worker, and you might think, no, I need to learn how to drive. And I guess the message here is, even though I have dyspraxia, and that was a significant barrier to stop me from driving and put me out of work for 2 years, you can drive, because many people with dyspraxia do drive, but you might need to just adopt certain strategies. So I guess for me, it's about finding the right support and learn in the way that works for you, and keep moving. Here are some final questions on dyspraxia to further aid understanding. Question 1. What is dyspraxia and how does it affect daily life? Question 2. What tools and strategies can help me thrive with dyspraxia? Question 3. How can I overcome challenges and remove barriers related to dyspraxia? And finally, question 4. What unique strengths and talents are associated with dyspraxia? Now, with that being said, I sincerely hope that this content has provided value.